Kempire is brought to you by
Washington, D.C., the Kempire After Dark, the Villain Era live tour is coming to your city on August 22nd. But before that, we're coming to Philly on July 10th at City Winery. Then we're going to Atlanta on August 5th. Then we're going to Washington, D.C., and this is going to be an all-new show, all new hot topics, all new reality TV conversation, and all kinds of amazing guests and surprises. Be sure to get your tickets today, and don't forget, we're coming back to New York City on September 12th. Go get your tickets. There's also a live stream option exclusively for the New York City show. More information will be available in the description.
You're listening to Kempire here on the Kempire Radio Network.
Order in the court. Order in the court. It looks like the energy around Diddy is so chaotic. I told you already, outside the courtroom, there's chaos. But now, today, a woman had to be escorted out of day 15 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Let's get into your update here on the Kempire Channel. Before we get into day 15 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, we have some things to talk about, and as always, we will be citing our sources and linking you in the description. So there's a lot of chaos going on, and Christina Currum, former chief of staff of Sean Diddy Combs, we have no idea whether or not she's going to take the stand. However, we did a recent collaboration with prosecutor Kirsten Brown. For those that may have missed it, maybe you're new to the channel, please go and watch it. It's the main video on my YouTube page. And if you're listening to this, you can also find it on the podcast. It is so educational. We're definitely bringing Kirsten back. So many of you said you love her perspective, not just because you agree with her, but you felt like you got something from it. You learned something from it. And that is the whole point. I want us as a community to be educated in understanding what we're hearing and what we're watching week to week. So be sure to check that out. But Christina Currum, his name has come up multiple times in civil lawsuits, but definitely within this trial, including on day 15, her name comes up as one of the people that was involved in covering up the 2016 hotel video where you see Diddy dragging and kicking Cassie Ventura. So her name comes up, and I have to talk about what Law and Crime did. They did a separate video talking about whether or not Christina Currum would testify. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the chaos that transpired today in the courtroom. Shout out to our friends over at CBS News and Jerica Duncan, who's been doing a marvelous job. We've highlighted some of her reporting before here during our Diddy trial updates. She gives us a perspective in regards to what played out in court today.
A woman was removed from the courtroom after being incredibly disruptive. She had a message for Combs saying that people are talking about you outside the courtroom, but she also dared the security officials to, quote, pull out your gun. 3 officials had to remove her from the courtroom. All of this happening before the next witness even takes the stand. The prosecution asking the judge during this time to consider allowing jail calls from Combs into the court as evidence. They said it would corroborate Mia's story. Mia is the former assistant to Combs who claims that she was assaulted and abused.
So that will be interesting. First of all, this is the first time this is the 4th week that we're talking about this, that there's been some sort of outburst in court. Diddy's sons have been attending this week, including his mother. One of the things that Jericho reported in another video was that the sons were both wearing baby blue, and so was Diddy. So clearly they're, I guess, wanting to match. I don't understand the psychology behind that, or maybe that's just Diddy's way of who Diddy has always been. It's always about appearances. So I don't know. Can we do something about Mama Combs' wigs? But okay, I've digressed. Let me focus. Let's talk about Christina Currum, because I think it's important, because one of the things that Kirsten Brown, the attorney that we had here on the channel, pointed out, she believes, her hot take was that Cassie Ventura actually isn't the star witness here, that she believes that there will be more influential witnesses or witness that will be coming later in the prosecution's case. And then I said, Christina Currum would probably be that witness. But whose side would she testify on? She's implicated in a lot of things here. So she testifies on Diddy's behalf. That means she could be charged later. But again, as always, I cite my source. Law and Crime did this special video, their sidebar video, talking about Christina Currum being the right-hand woman. I think it was Little Rod's lawsuit where he said that she was the Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who's now serving time for being partners with Jeffrey Epstein and his dirty deeds. So let's get into what they had to say on Law and Crime with Jesse Weber.
We are entering week 4 of the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial, and there is one name that has come up quite a bit. Not only someone who may know quite a few things about the rap mogul.
And for those that say it sounds weird, we're playing it a little bit faster just because there's a lot of content here, and I don't want this video to be too long.
But someone who may be the key to this whole racketeering case. Will Christina Currum, Combs' alleged right-hand woman, testify? And what could she say exactly? Well, we're going to dive into what other witnesses have said about her so far and her alleged role in this whole saga. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Christina Currum, Sean Diddy Combs' reported former chief of staff. Now, she might not have testified in his criminal trial as of yet, but she's got to, right? I mean, in a prostitution, trafficking, especially a racketeering case like this, where prosecutors allege that Combs operated this criminal enterprise that engaged in a pattern of illegal activities for his benefit, and that he used his company resources and his staff to carry out crimes and cover them up, Khorram has to be a central witness who's going to testify for the government, right? Don't you need to explain the inner workings of this operation? Particularly if you charge Combs with racketeering conspiracy, right? This criminal agreement that he criminally agreed to further racketeering activity. He can't do it by himself. The natural question becomes, based on what has been said in court so far about Christina Currum, is she a co-conspirator who's now going to testify against him? Has she been granted protection to do so? And to think about that, his former chief of staff, someone who has been described as his right-hand person, testifying against him, isn't that going to be devastating? That is what we're going to discuss, and how she's already been brought up so many times in this trial so far. It is fascinating because the name Christina Currum has already come up quite a bit since the
including today in day 15.
Legal saga began. She's been mentioned in several lawsuits against the rap mogul and even named as a defendant in some of them too. For instance, a woman named Ashley Parham filed a suit claiming she was violently ganged by comedian Drewski, NFL star Odell Beckham, and violently assaulted with a remote by Sean Combs. And in that lawsuit, as far as Khorram, it says, quote, defendant KK told defendant Diddy that she did not think giving plaintiff a Glasgow smile would be advantageous to the potential clients who they could sell plaintiff for sex to. Defendant KK then made a threat to plaintiff that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. There was also an accusation that Combs had forced Christina Currum to use a syringe to insert an IUD into Parham. And apparently, she and Combs argued over it, not over actually doing it, but that it wasn't going to work. Really weird allegation, but a serious allegation nonetheless. And that's not the only lawsuit that she's been named in as a defendant. She was named in another suit that was filed by a series of plaintiffs, and they claim that she, quote, aided Combs in his abuse of men and women and covered up sexual assaults. She was also reportedly mentioned in other lawsuits, like one that was filed by a former employee who claims that Khorram would order him to clean up hotel rooms after Combs' wild sex parties. And maybe most famously, and the first time I personally heard of her name was when she was named as a defendant in the lawsuit brought by Combs' former producer, Rodney Lil Rod Jones, who claims sexual harassment, violation of the racketeering statute. He claims Christina Currum manages the day-to-day of Combs' alleged criminal and sex trafficking enterprise, and basically made the allegation that she was like the Ghislaine Maxwell of this operation. Obviously, a reference to the associate of deceased financier Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell ended up getting convicted of sex trafficking charges and sentenced to 20 years in prison. And by the way, I'll tell you what, as reported by The Hollywood Reporter, Combs seemingly highlighted Christina Currum in a 2021 Facebook post, writing, KK keeps everything in my life and my business running. She's been my right hand for the last 8 years and has consistently proven to execute and get S done. Don't know how I'd function without her. Now, a few months back, Khorram released a statement that...
And I literally said back then when we talked about Christina Currum in another video that I wonder if he did that publicly for a reason. Did he do that strategically in order to implicate her? And did he do this before? Remember, Mia was being scrutinized by Diddy's defense team over the last couple of days about you would post that you loved him and this and that. The other element of the mentality, and I hope that they have some experts that talk about cults, because I was just talking about this with Taria Faison from the What Else Is Going On podcast, and the comparison on what Diddy created in this enterprise is very similar to a cult. But here's the challenging part about cults. It's hard to get these cults, the leaders of these cults, arrested. There are plenty of cults that are going on right now over there in California, LA. I just saw a woman on TikTok talking about she's been approached by so many cults since living in LA. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's scary.
I've been invited to so many cults in LA. It's to the point where if I am invited to a dinner party and someone says, I just want to tell you guys about this thing. I hope everybody keeps an open mind. I'm leaving. If you send me a text message like, oh yeah, dinner's at 7, and I ask like, what should I bring? Should I bring red or white? And you're like, oh no, you don't have to bring any alcohol. Just, bring yourself and bring an open mind. I'm not coming. I've been invited to join 4 different cults in LA. The first cult that I got invited to join was when I had first gotten here. It was like my first week of being in Los Angeles. And it was through like an acquaintance who was also from Sacramento and had come down here before I did, and they were inviting me to join. I actually fell asleep during the meeting. First cult was, it seemed like a basic pyramid scheme, MLM on the surface, and then, you know, it got exposed later that it was a full-on schmex cult. The second cult that I got invited to join was at the end of my first year in Los Angeles. It was very openly a schmex cult. They weren't trying to hide behind any sort of business model. Third cult that I got invited to join was like a few years later, and I was like, oh, I thought I had been finished with all the cult invites. This cult was a pyramid scheme. I was invited by some friends from college. They had joined the cult. They were really excited about it, and they had finally found, you know, the answers and that they were searching for. Most recent cult that I was invited to join was like maybe a few years ago, right before COVID, and it was a travel MLM. So again, got exposed as a schmex cult. And something that all of these cults had in common, one, was that they were preying upon people who were new to Los Angeles and or people who had gotten lost in the system, people who weren't necessarily seeing their goals being met or achieved within a timeline that they thought was reasonable. They also, for people who had very weak family ties, people who they weren't getting along with their family or had never gotten along with their family or had never had a family. They also were looking for people who valued monetary success, being able to show that they had monetary success. People who were posting online about their wins and how they showed up in the things that they could purchase or the things that they could acquire with money. And I was like, and each one of them, I saw exactly what they were very, very soon. Like, it was as soon as the presentation started, it was like, oh, this is a cult. My friend's in a cult. The friend who invited me is in a full-on cult. Wow, that's interesting. And some of them have gotten out. You know, I don't know if they even know that they were in a cult. Maybe when the organization fell apart, they just, you know, went and found something else. But I had this one guy, he's actually really popular on TikTok now, he wasn't the cult leader, he was the manager of this particular level of the MLM. And I said point blank, I was like, hey, this is a pyramid scheme. I don't think anybody in here should join this. Y'all are gonna go to jail. Like, where did you get your shirt from? I was like, I don't know, it was a gift. He's like, what about them pants? I don't know, it was a gift. He's like, your shoes. I was like, dang. I am so loved. This was yet another gift from another person. Wow, and it's not even my birthday. And everybody started laughing. And he did not like that. He did not like that at all. He was like, look at the tag. So I looked at the tag. I was like, oh, this was from Nordstrom. And he was like, well, my point is, you know, somebody at Nordstrom had to sell you that top that you have on. And I was like, yeah, but somebody at Nordstrom who sold the person who bought this gift for me, this top, didn't have to pay for the top in order to sell it. And what you're asking everybody in this room to do is to pay to sell stuff. That doesn't make any sense. And I was asked to leave. One of the girls that signed up that night is no longer on this ancestral plane. And it did happen around the time she had joined said cult. The former cult leaders now on TikTok proselytizing, it's a little easier to do here. Just be mindful about who you're taking advice from. I'm not trying to give advice, just a warning based off of who I've been seeing on my FYP. Cool.
Here's the thing in regards to this. When Taria and I were talking about the association and the correlation, because she had a conversation with someone else that was an ex-Mormon talking about the correlation of cults and how this operation that Diddy created could be considered a cult and why people stay. I know a lot of people are so critical of the former employees saying like, but you stayed. People are critical of Cassie, but you stayed. You wanted the limelight. You wanted the success and things like that. Well, if you watch any of these documentaries on cults and how many people who would have never thought that they would fall into a cult, this could be considered the Diddy cult in regards to the culture that he created and the abuses that he would inflict upon the people that worked for him. And that worked for him because remember, just because you're in a cult doesn't mean that you don't get paid. There are plenty of people that are getting paid. They're just not getting paid the right amount of money that they should be working. We've heard Capricorn Clark talk about how much she got paid. Mia talk about how much she got paid. And for the amount of time, overtime that they worked, working 20 to 24 hours a day to the point where you're delirious, that could also have been strategic by Diddy. Make these people hooked on drugs, allegedly, delirious, lack of sleep, basically making their mindsets foggy. Because you know what they say, lack of sleep is just as bad as being intoxicated. And you shouldn't get behind the wheel of a car when you are sleep deprived either. So I'm wondering if all of that was a part of his manipulation, along with the things that he said and did and how he did it. I talked about when Capricorn Clark was held for 5 days taking a lie detector test with threats of violence against her and her life. And he did that for 5 days, accusing her of taking jewelry. And I said, did he really lose that jewelry? Or was he just doing this to start the process of manipulating her and controlling her and conditioning her? I'm not an expert on cults, but maybe we need to get one to talk about how this could possibly fall in the world of cultism. Let's get back into this. In Christina Currum, I am ready to hear what Christina Currum has to say.
Was published by USA Today, first reported by Rolling Stone, and she said the following. For months, horrific accusations have been made about me in various lawsuits regarding my former boss. These false allegations of my involvement are causing irreparable and incalculable damage to my reputation and the emotional well-being of myself and my family. I have never condoned or aided and abetted the sexual assault of anyone, nor have I ever drugged anyone. The idea that I could be accused of playing a role in or even being a bystander to the rape of anyone is beyond upsetting, disturbing, and unthinkable. That is not who I am, and my heart goes out to all victims of sexual assault. I am confident that the allegations against me will be proven to be untrue. Now, to be clear, while those specific allegations in the civil lawsuits haven't come up in the criminal trial, she has come up in a lot of ways already during testimony in Sean Combs' criminal case, which again makes me wonder, will she testify for the prosecution? Is it possible that she can actually help the defense? Give an example. Give an example of an idea of how she's come up so far and her potential value as a witness. So Combs' former assistant, George Kaplan, testified about Christina Currum. Who did you personally report to when you were Mr. Combs' assistant? I reported to Christina Currum, who is the director of his office. Do you recognize the person in that photograph? Yes. Who is that? Christina Currum. The same Christina Currum you were just talking about? Yes. Do you know her by any other names? KK. What was her role within Combs Enterprises? She was the director of Mr. Combs' executive office. So what were her job responsibilities? She essentially ran Mr. Combs' life. And more specifically, with respect to the charges that Combs faces, remember prosecutors are saying that women like Cassandra Ventura were forced into elaborate, prolonged sexual performances known as freak-offs with commercial sex workers that happened in various places, in various hotel rooms, and that Combs had his people prepare the rooms and clean them up afterwards. So if we accept that these are essentially crime scenes, listen to what Kaplan said on the stand. Who usually instructed you to set up a hotel room for Mr. Combs? Either Mr. Combs himself or Kristina. When you say Kristina, do you mean Christina Currum? Yes. A lot more to get into. I want to bring in right now former Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Arenberg, who hosts Legal AF, which is part of the Midas Touch Network. Dave, so good to have you on here. Am I wrong? She's got to be called. She's got to be called as a witness in this case, no?
Absolutely. I mean, when you said that she was referred to as Diddy's right hand, it was Diddy who said that. So yeah, she has to. And it is very telling that she has not been charged with any crime. Why do you think? I mean, if she is allegedly the Ghislaine Maxwell to Diddy in this case, why has she not been charged like Ghislaine Maxwell? Well, I would think it's because she's already cut a deal with prosecutors. Otherwise, I think it'd be game on, and she would be in the prosecutor's crosshair. So I do expect that she is cooperating, at least in some way, with the prosecution, and I do think she will appear at trial.
How do you think specifically she would prove racketeering, or help prove racketeering, a criminal enterprise? How would she prove the sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura? How would she help prove transportation to engage in prostitution, transporting alleged victims and sex workers with the intent that they engage in prostitution and sex work? What are some of the things you think she'd be called to testify about?
when you have to prove racketeering, you've got to prove an ongoing criminal enterprise, not some ad hoc thing that you do with your friends and acquaintances, an enterprise. Well, if you're going to say that Diddy's record company is part of this criminal enterprise, you have to call employees of that company. Who better than Diddy's right hand? She knows, metaphorically speaking, where all the bodies are buried. So when it comes to racketeering, whether there were 2 predicate crimes, she can provide evidence. She can provide evidence that this is an ongoing criminal operation. And yes, she can provide evidence on the other count of human trafficking to show that Diddy allegedly harbored, transported, in other ways, created this system of force, fraud, and abuse that led these individuals like Cassie to perform sex acts for money. And that's what happened. When you talk about human trafficking, it's a commercial sex act and you need force, fraud, or coercion. Well, that's what we're talking about here, and that's the evidence that this witness can provide.
So it came out during testimony that Homeland Security, HSI, they seized a cell phone of Christina Currum on September 16, 2024 at the Park Hyatt Hotel when Combs was ultimately arrested. That's got to be quite telling and a very interesting piece of evidence.
Oh, man, you don't want the authorities to have your phone, right? The phone tells all. I mean, so many cases we've seen where there are new charges that come after the authorities get your phone. And so, yes, so you think you would have to assume that the authorities know everything that KK knows. That's what Diddy calls her. And that's why the fact that she has not been charged tells me that she has been cooperating. She could be called as a rebuttal witness by the feds, or she could, as you said, and perhaps she'll be called as a defense witness. That is perilous, though, because if she lies on the stand, that could result in a perjury charge. Even if she cut a deal with prosecutors for immunity, that doesn't cover perjury. So
that was something new that I learned from listening to this video, from watching this video, that that we've seen a few people that have worked with Diddy that have testified against him that have asked for immunity. And I thought that was interesting. Immunity does not protect you from perjury. Rightfully so. If you get on the stand and lie, you should not be protected for that. I wonder what the penalties for that would be.
Is a minefield if you call her to the stand as part of the defense. I think perhaps the prosecution has her lying in wait in case they need her as a rebuttal witness.
So I'm going to get into a minute all the times, or a lot of the times, that she was mentioned already in testimony and kind of give us a preview of what she might testify to and how she might be used by the prosecution and the defense. But real quick, as a point of law, the allegations that she's facing in the civil lawsuits, whether she's named as a defendant or not, you think any of that is going to come up in the criminal case against Sean Combs?
Well, it could. I mean, it's fair game if she's called to the stand. The accusations against her can come in. I mean, if she testifies against Diddy, Diddy's people can tear her apart by pointing a finger at her. They can try to make her into the bad guy, into her as the one who is trying to save her own hide by coming up with these lies. She's the one being sued, and she's going to say anything to get out of it. So that's the kind of thing you could see if she does turn on Diddy. On the other hand, the fact that she's been sued by various people and with really salacious allegations, yeah, that is something that's going to hang over her head. And that is something that Diddy can use against her if she is called by the prosecution as a rebuttal witness.
I want to talk a little bit about how she was already brought up during the course of this trial. So I mentioned George Kaplan. So he testified that he was a witness to the abuse of Cassandra Ventura, victim number 1 in this case. Prosecutors say that Combs used violence, threats, financial control, intimidation, manipulation to coerce her into commercial sex acts, right? Trafficking. And Kaplan said that one time he was on a private plane, heard glass shattering, and he sees Sean Combs holding up a whiskey glass over his head. Cassie's on the floor. Her hands are in front of her face. He also said he observed Combs throw green apples at another girlfriend of his in his Miami home. So this pattern of abusing women, important for racketeering. And this is the back and forth question. What did you tell KK? I gave her a recount of what I had observed the night before. Did you tell her everything you have just told us? Yes. What, if anything, did you tell her about what you had observed on the jet involving Cassie? I told her each time that I witnessed any sort of violent act. Did you tell KK about the incident on the jet? Yes. Do you remember being asked about the conversation you had that next day with Christina Currum? Yes. Did you tell her about both of these incidents during that conversation? No. Which incident did you tell her about? The green apple incident. And earlier, had you told her about the incident on the jet? Yes. What did you tell her about why you decided to quit working for Mr. Combs during that conversation? I think the words I used were that I was unwilling to stand by the behavior. What behavior were you talking about in the context of that conversation with Christina? The green apples and the airplane incident. Did you tell Christina you were going to quit because of that? Yes. Did Christina say she was going to quit too? No. Did Christina, as far as you know, quit any time after you left? No. As far as you know, how long did Christina stay working for Mr. Combs after you told her about these 2 incidents that shook you tremendously? I haven't spoken to her in a while, but my understanding was that she was working for him up until pretty recently.
She was. Literally, after his home was raided by Homeland Security, there is footage of her, I guess not consoling him, but sitting there. She's in a robe, sitting there with him, and he looks distraught. For whatever reason. I think that was, I don't remember if it was right after the Homeland Security raid, but she worked with him up until recently.
What does that tell you?
Tells you, allegedly, she was in on the whole thing. I mean, she seems to be the one employee that hasn't broken from Diddy, that hasn't been attacked or threatened. And why is that? Because allegedly she has been carrying out Diddy's criminal enterprise. That's what the government, I'm sure, believes. But why hasn't she been charged? Because she knows so much she could sink Diddy. So I think that's why. Or maybe if they haven't cut a deal with her, they're waiting to charge her afterwards, like Ghislaine Maxwell was charged afterwards, but from after Jeffrey Epstein.
So that is a different perspective than when we were speaking with Kirsten Brown, a prosecutor. She says that they've got their guy. She highly doubts that anyone will be facing charges after this, but You just never know. For all we know, she could be working with the prosecution, but if she decides, I don't want to work with you guys anymore, because I am willing to bet money that Diddy has been in contact with Christina Currum after his arrest. And I wouldn't be surprised at some of the things that he's been accused of in this case alone and in civil lawsuits, that he has incessantly been in contact with her. Mia talked about how D-Rock reached out to her. I believe it was after the Cassie situation, trying to feel out what's going on with her, to feel out if she's going to say anything. And I think this is part of the reason you saw what Jerrica Duncan said in her report, that it feels as if they are trying, the prosecution's trying to have these jailhouse calls, because Diddy's not that smart. All these things are recorded, trying to have these jailhouse calls included in this case. I want to hear those jailhouse calls.
I think it's more likely that a deal's been cut. I mean, some of these allegations are crazy.
And the jury would know about that? She'll be asked about that, right?
About whether she cut a deal with prosecutors? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's always used by defense lawyers to undermine the credibility of a witness, saying, oh, you're here under immunity agreement, right? You cut a deal with prosecutors.
And we've seen that already in the Diddy trial, where that is brought up. And then if you have an expert come on trial, so you're being paid to be an expert here. How much are you being paid to be an expert?
Right? You're facing decades of prison, and that's why you're here lying on a stand. That's the kind of stuff. By the way, it doesn't mean she's lying. It just means that she's thinking about herself. That's human nature. Yeah. I just had to say, all these incidents, how can Diddy survive in the court of public?
And I don't blame KK for thinking about herself, because let's say she did not work with the prosecution. If he's facing life in prison, can you imagine the amount of years that she could be facing in prison as well?
Opinion, no matter what happens here. I mean, you have the Green Apple incident. Well, I actually just had to Google the Glasgow smile. I didn't even know what that was.
So that allegation, right, was from one of the civil suits. I mean, look, the court of public opinion, I don't think there's a way for him to recover. The lawsuit, the actual criminal trial, it does become a question. Does it amount to sex trafficking? Does it amount to racketeering? I could play both sides here. I could do a whole analysis back and forth about whether or not at this point in the trial the prosecution's proven it or not. I think they're convinced he might not be a great guy. He might have abused people, but does it amount to a criminal enterprise? And that's why I think Christina Currum may be an important witness. By the way, Cassie Ventura also testified about Christina Currum too. Listen to this exchange. When you mention trusted assistants, who were some of the trusted assistants? I mean, in the very beginning, it was David James. It just kind of changed over time. Christina Currum, eventually, Neil Dominic, he had a lot of different assistants. At what point in your relationship did you start communicating with Miss Khorram? As soon as she started, I'm not positive the year. Was that in the beginning, the middle, or the end of your relationship with Sean? It was like the middle of the relationship. What did you call Miss Khorram? I called her KK. And how frequently did you interact with KK? Every day. And what subject matters did you communicate with KK about? Everything from scheduling to what kind of mood he was in. I talked to KK about a lot. She knew a lot of my personal things. Aside from conversations you had with your attorney, which I don't want you to ask about, was there any other way you went about trying to contact Sean regarding the book chapters? By the way, I'm taking different pieces of the testimony, but this is, I believe, was about Ventura allegedly offering Combs the rights to her book about her experiences, about her time with him, possibly that he would buy them for $30 million. Well, anyway, Ventura responded, yeah, I reached directly out to Kristina, to KK. What did you ask KK? I asked if he had read it and or just knew about it at all. And she said that basically it hadn't been taken seriously. Like, I don't think anybody believed that was actually me. So what do you mean you don't think anyone believed that was you? She said it wasn't taken seriously. Like, they didn't think that I would do something like that. Then, by the way, she testified about an episode where Combs had allegedly tried to get into her apartment. So listen to this exchange. Ms. Ventura, how do you know Sean was trying to get into the apartment? Because I was notified by his assistant. Who told you Sean was trying to get into your apartment? Well, Kerry, because she was there, and Christina Currum. What, if anything, could you hear while this was happening? Just chaos outside the door, banging, kicking, yelling. So Dave, according to Ventura, Khorram was essentially in the thick of it all. And it does make you wonder, exactly, does she corroborate Cassandra Ventura's account, and how much is she going to be grilled about this? Again, I think a central role she might play.
Yeah, the big defense for Diddy and all this is consent. He's trying to make jurors believe that Cassie and the others consented to this activity. And if you can prove or at least show some doubt that there was consent here for that alleged human trafficking, then the whole case falls apart. So how do you combat that if you're Cassie? Well, you have corroboration. You have other witnesses who have testified, but also you have contemporary statements that she made to KK. Statements that said, here, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. And that kind of stuff's important because it shows that Cassie was being forced into it or was being coerced into it. And any statement she made at the time can come in to show her present sense impressions, that she was thinking like this at the time. This was her spontaneous comments, and it shows that she was under duress, that it was not consensual. So KK is valuable for a lot of reasons. And that's why I guess maybe I'm a little surprised she has not been called yet by the...
Hence why she might actually be the star witness, not Cassie. Cassie is the first chapter in the story that the prosecution seemingly is painting for us.
Let's talk about that.
That could happen. Yeah.
I think it was strategic because other people have already testified about her too, right? And I think it's strategic on the part of prosecutors to not call her yet. Why do I say that? Deontay Nash, this was Combs and Cassie's stylist, took the stand. Question, who on Mr. Combs' staff did you talk to about the violence you observe Mr. Combs inflict on Cassie? Derek and Kristina. Who is Kristina? Puff's assistant. How did Kristina respond when you told her about violence you observed between Mr. Combs and Cassie? That she would talk to him. Then there was an objection. The court overruled it. And did the violence stop after she said that? No. You said he would blow everyone's phone up. Who's the he? Puff. And when you say blow everyone's phone up, what did you mean? He would call incessantly. Who did you see him call incessantly? Me and Cassie. And who else during those same periods called you and Cassie? Kristina. Kristina Currum? Yes. Did you answer any of those calls? Yes. When you answered Mr. Combs' calls, what did he say? He would just say, we needed to get back to the house. She needs to get back to the house. And what do you remember his tone being? Sometimes angry. Sometimes he would soften up. And what do you remember Kristina saying when you answered her calls? That she was going to help with the situation, that he's calmed down, that we should come back to the house. Then there was Ventura's former friend, Kerry Morgan, who testified about Christina Currum. Question, why would Ms. Khorram tell you she was trying to call you if he couldn't get in touch with Cassie, usually? Did she ever tell you who had told her to call? Well, I'm assuming it would be Sean. Without assuming, did she ever say that he had told her to call? Yes. And she testified about this alleged encounter when Combs allegedly showed up to Ventura's home, pounding on the door with a hammer. This, by the way, was after the infamous 2016 hotel video of Combs appearing to beat up Cassandra Ventura. Morgan testified police were called after Combs couldn't get into the apartment. Quote, who, if anyone, did you tell about the police officers arriving at the apartment? Christina Currum. Ms. Morgan, do you recognize the participants in this chat? Yes. Who are they? Me and Kristina. Could you please read your first two messages? I'm so sorry I missed your calls. I'm just so not used to this S. Are you okay? And then the first two messages on the next page. It's so dramatic. I haven't been looking at my phone. We're okay, but it's just so nuts. Okay, turning to this next message, can you read it, please? I don't think anyone should call her. Who is the her you're referring to? Cassie. Did you send an attachment with this message? Yes. What was that attachment? It's the card that the detective left. I'll read Ms. Khorram's messages if you read your own, please. Can I call you in a bit when I'm alone? She was looking for anyone to say the wrong thing so she can call domestic abuse. Who is the she that you're referring to in this statement? The police officer that came? Okay, turning to the next messages, could you please read? Of course. Cass just asked me to send you that. And what were you referring to when you said Cass just asked me to send you that? The business card of the detective. In these messages, Ms. Khorram mentioned she is going to call you. Did you talk with Ms. Khorram on the phone after this? I'm not sure. Mia, Combs' former assistant, Mia took the stand, testified that Combs physically and sexually assaulted her. And she, too, testified about how Christina Currum was in the thick of it, the knowledge component, alleged cooperation or facilitating this. So Khorram would contact her, allegedly, when Combs wanted to get a hold of her. Again, alleged victim number 4. But it's interesting. For example, Khorram allegedly messaged her, he just called me again, and he said he needs you to call him now. I told him everything you said, and he does not want to listen, and said you need to call him now. Mia, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to do. Mia, he just told me to tell you if you don't call him in the next 2 minutes, you don't have a job. Dave, is Khorram a reluctant co-conspirator for racketeering conspiracy? And by the way, strategic, I think it was strategic to bring her up so much for the jury that when she finally does maybe testify, the jury is very familiar with who Christina Currum is. So 2 points there. Do you think she's a reluctant co-conspirator? Because again, racketeering conspiracy, he can't be it himself. And was there this...
So familiar, the jury will be referring to her as KK. They're like, oh, that's KK.
And again, I think the strategic point of it was the jury's going to recognize her if and when she testifies.
Yeah. Well, at times she does appear to be a reluctant co-conspirator, like that last email you read. But at other times she seems to eagerly try to cover up for him and really enable him. So yeah, it just depends. You can get her both ways. You can get her someone who was full-fledged in on the racketeering, and other times that she was had a conscience and she was reluctant to go along, but she ultimately did. Either way, you got her as part of the conspiracy, the racketeering. You know, you could have done it either way. You could have brought her in after all the other people testified because they all corroborate each other. So if she goes up and lies, she'll look really bad, and it could blow back on the defense to say, oh, this is the employee covering up, and then you could always charge her for perjury. But I do think there is value, as I've been saying, about calling her as a rebuttal witness. It's like the sword of Damocles hanging over.
How much time can you serve for perjury federally? And I'm sure there's a difference. That's a good question to ask someone. Lawyers in the chat, let us know. How much time could she serve for perjury?
Diddy's head. You want to play? You want to put on some lies on your defense? I got the ace in the hole. I got that sword of Damocles. I've got KK who will come and just corroborate everything Cassie said and undermine everything you said in your case. So you better be careful what you say in your defense.
Before we wrap things up, I have to talk to you about what I think the defense might do with her, right? And whether or not she'd be called by the defense. Seems unlikely. Seems like she'd be called by the prosecution. But if you go back to the cross-examination of these witnesses by Combs' defense attorneys and how these people were questioned specifically by Combs' attorneys about Christina Currum, I wonder if it gives us kind of a preview of how they might use Christina Currum for their benefit if she testifies. For example, George Kaplan, this was cross-examination, explaining who Christina Currum was. She was my immediate boss. Certainly in the first 6 months that I was there, she told me what to do and when to do it. I learned how to do the job very much from her guidance. I talked to her more than I talked to any other individual on the staff. We certainly bonded over the amount of time that we spent together, which was many hours in different locations and late nights and things like that. You said that at some point you spoke to Kristina about the violence that you saw, correct? Correct. And if I remember your answer right, I think you said that Kristina was disappointed and saddened, correct? And that's what she expressed to you in the conversation you had with her, right? Correct. And she was disappointed in Mr. Combs, is that right? Yes. As were you? Yes. You and Kristina had a conversation when you said, this is what I saw. You told her what you saw, and you were disappointed, and even more than disappointed. I was sad. You were sad. And part of the reason you were sad, and tell me if it's right, I'm sorry for doing this way, because it's sad, right? Yeah, it's horrible. Then there was this cross of Kerry Morgan. KK was Sean Combs' chief of staff or personal assistant. She was with him all the time. She took care of she was like his right hand, basically. She's a good, really nice girl. Question to Morgan was, did you have your own relationship with KK? I did. And tell us about that. About a relationship? Yeah. It wasn't, we would only see each other when she was working or when I was hanging out with them, but we would hang out at Burning Man and stuff. She was there. We would hang out. We weren't that close, but understood. You said a minute ago that she's a nice girl. Just tell us more. She's a nice girl. She always seemed very innocent, and she's always trying to help everybody. She was always nice. I think that's deliberate here, Dave, right? I think it goes to the idea of this was all domestic violence. She didn't approve of it. She had no choice but to, do what Sean Combs wanted, but it wasn't necessarily a crime. She's a good person. Is that what you're getting from this cross?
Yes, and it is interesting in this case how both sides are working off largely the same facts. There's not too much of a dispute over the facts. It's just how to interpret them. On the defense, they're saying, yeah, Diddy was a bad guy. He was jealous. He is a domestic abuser, and so he should perhaps be charged in state court. But this is a federal trial, not on domestic abuse, but on racketeering, on human trafficking, on prostitution. Those charges don't apply. And here's the evidence, as we're going to interpret it, that proves this. This is a case of a jealous guy who had issues and committed some bad acts, but it wasn't human trafficking. It wasn't racketeering. That's a defense. On the other hand, the prosecution can paint this larger picture of a guy who's out of control, who ran this whole enterprise to do his bidding. And that included KK. That included force, fraud, and coercion for human trafficking. That included prostitution. And yes, it included racketeering through at least 2 predicate acts. We saw the Kid Cudi arson. We've seen the witness intimidation. We've seen the extortion. All these acts. So pick your poison. Guilty.
I think the defense is basically saying there was no criminal.
But we also have to convince the jury that he had something to do with the Kid Cudi of it all and those other acts. Because remember, there's a debate whether or not he had anything to do. Look, I believe Diddy didn't always do his dirty work, but some might say they found female DNA at the scene.
She didn't agree to further any of this illegal activity. She didn't further sex trafficking operation. This idea was she didn't approve of any of this. She didn't condone any of this. I think that's what they're going with. So it'll be very interesting to see if Christina Currum takes the stand. She's already been mentioned so many times. Dave Arenberg.
Yeah. Shout out to Law and Crime. I will post the full video for those that want to hear it normally. I just sped it up because we have a lot to cover when it comes to day 15 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Before we get into our updates from what's happening inside the courtroom, reminder to like this video. It's an easy and free way of supporting not just my channel, but other channels as well. Don't forget, you can also get your Diddy updates and other additional content, including extended versions of our video versions, because sometimes I end up finding some more things that I feel is relevant and gives us a better picture as to what's playing out in this case, exclusively on the Kempire podcast. While you're there, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So let's get into this. Again, we're citing our friends over at NBC News, because I have to say, I've read so many different summaries. They still, for me, in day 15, have been a great resource. Every once in a while, I will go to our friends over at Inner City Press in regards to reading some of what he's reporting on in regards to what's happening in the courtroom. We won't be doing that today just because we have a lot to cover in regards to the day's events. But if and when Christina Currum testifies, we will be reading that from beginning to end.
Yup.
I'm pretty sure that will be multiple days. And the prosecution is ahead of schedule. I don't know if they still consider themselves ahead of schedule now in this week, but it seems like they're on par, and the judge wants them to be on schedule. He wants the jury to start deliberations by July 4th, and that's a Friday. We do too. I want them to start deliberating before July 4th because I would like to go have a good July 4th. This is a full-time job covering this every single day. And I see all of you. Thank you so much for all of the appreciation, the super chats, the thanks, the Venmos, I appreciate all of the thanks any way that you can. You can also just thank me by liking the video. All right? Our friends over at NBC News give us an update from the morning's events. They said Eddie Garcia, a security supervisor at the Los Angeles Hotel, Intercontinental Hotel, where Combs was seen on security video assaulting longtime girlfriend Cassie Ventura in 2016, is expected to take the stand today. Garcia was in court briefly yesterday to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Yesterday, a woman identified as Mia took the stand for a third and final day. I know Mia is so done with talking about this. And what she talked about was so traumatic. Combs' former personal assistant, a woman identified in court by the pseudonym Mia, finished her testimony yesterday. She faced cross-examination yesterday after accusing Combs of SAing her on multiple occasions. The defense repeatedly asked Mia why she stayed with Combs despite the alleged assaults she says that she endured. She says, because when he was happy, I was safe, she told the court. There was a lot of trying to discredit her by using her social media post, but she says that was what was required of us. We also told you that there was video footage that the defense wanted as a part of this case because it said it showed a difference in her demeanor. And I still don't, because again, I didn't see the footage. I'm trying to understand, what do they mean by demeanor? First of all, she's testifying about being SA'd, and you're wanting to show when she was working and had to, and honestly, you have to, and I'm sure there were times where things were good, but also I'm sure there were times where you had to pretend like things are good when you're not feeling 100%. So Combs' assistant, Mia, said, I was brainwashed, she said on the stand, which prevented her from coming forward earlier about the alleged sexual abuse. Brainwashed. Cult. Just saying. It's been a long process, she said. I'm still untangling these things. I'm in therapy. She felt as she had no choice but to testify against Combs because she didn't want her younger female loved ones to turn a blind eye to the issue of SA. Because I can't look at my niece and my goddaughters in the eyes in the future if they happen to be in this situation. And she would want them to come to her if this, God forbid, happened to them. Eddie Garcia, former security supervisor at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, will testify under immunity order after asserting his Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself. His deal with the government provides him with immunity as long as he tells the truth. Again, if he perjures himself, he's not protected. So as long as he tells the truth on the witness stand, he's expected to speak on the $100,000 payoff Combs made in a brown paper bag to purchase the incriminating video of his attack on Ventura. While Combs doesn't deny the payoff, his attorneys say the payment was to avoid any negative press. They have to change the narrative because of what the government is trying to prove here in regards to trafficking and racketeering. So they have to say, well, no, he was trying to prevent negative press. He wasn't trying to spin any or create some criminal enterprise. All right, so let's get into this. So Frank Piazza will testify today, followed by either Derek Ferguson, former CFO of Combs Enterprises, or Brianna Bagalan, who alleges Combs dangled her over an apartment balcony. Oh my gosh. A person who was screaming in the gallery was removed from the courtroom shortly after prosecutors complained about the real identity of witness Mia being broadcast. So that was something that came out yesterday in regards to very quick, her image was shared with the overflow room, and that was not supposed to happen. The woman, who appears to be a supporter of the defendant, Diddy, cursing as she was taken away by law enforcement. Apparently, this was not the first time that they've had to speak with her, according to sources. Everyone is laughing at Diddy, said the woman, a regular courtroom spectator who claims to be a transit employee. Oh, Lord. It's not right what they're doing to him. Escort her out right now, the judge said. And I'm wondering I don't know if the jury was in the room at the time when this happened. I wonder if she was a plant. Or, again, not everything has to be Diddy's controlling the narrative. There are people that are freely defending Diddy. The judge says, escort her out right now. And this is the first major courtroom outburst of the trial. This is the first major courtroom outburst. However, I've heard from sources that this is not the first time that security has had to deal with her specifically. There have been disturbances in the overflow viewing spaces in the courthouse during this trial, but this is the first such situation in the courtroom itself, according to NBC News. Eddie Garcia, the security supervisor at the Intercontinental Hotel in LA in 2016 when Combs beat Ventura, has taken the witness stand. Garcia took the stand briefly yesterday to invoke his Fifth Amendment right, as we mentioned before. He was offered an immunity deal to protect him from prosecution so as long as he's honest. Garcia didn't initially recognize Combs or Ventura when watching the video of the March 2016 assault at the Intercontinental Hotel. He told the court that he was later notified of their identities. Garcia also testified that the law enforcement was not contacted and was told that Ventura did not request medical attention or the police. According to Garcia, Combs' former chief of staff, Christina Currum, quickly understood the potential career-ending problems that the surveillance video of her boss beating Ventura could cause. When Khorram asked Ventura for the tape, the witness told her that he didn't have the authority to produce the footage. He then told her to get a subpoena. Garcia testified that a call from Combs' team to his personal cell phone number had him nervous and that Combs repeatedly told him that he could help regarding the footage of him assaulting Ventura. Garcia said Combs' employee, Christina Currum, first made the call, but Combs eventually got on the phone himself. He told the court that Combs said that the video would ruin his career. Garcia explained on the call that he did not have access to the server room where the original video was and could not help. Combs offered to take care of him for the video, which Garcia said that he believed to mean financially. So apparently whatever copy that they gave to Diddy, they kept a copy because eventually, as you know, CNN got their hands on a version of the video that was shared last year. Garcia testified that Combs desperately wanted a copy of the surveillance footage of him beating Ventura at the Los Angeles hotel in 2016 and implied that he was willing to pay. The footage sold to Combs had to be the only copy because he didn't want it getting out. Garcia said that he talked to his boss, who was willing to do it for $50,000. Oh, Lord. Garcia testified that he expressed concerns about selling the only copy of the 2016 assault video, especially if Ventura had filed a police report in the matter. He told the court that he ended up on a FaceTime call with Combs and Ventura. Combs told Ventura to tell Garcia she also wanted the video to go away, Garcia said in court. So that's new information. We didn't know that, but this is not unusual for those that will start to spin a narrative. See, Cassie is no victim. This is a woman in a cycle of abuse. Of course, she's going to do whatever she can because not only has her abuser probably told her this will hurt your career as well. If I go down, you're going to go down as well. Who are you without me? I'm not saying this is what he said, but I can imagine. He told the court that he ended up on a FaceTime with Combs and Ventura. According to Garcia, Ventura then said it wasn't a good time for the video to come out and wanted it gone. As a part of the deal to get Combs' footage of the hotel beating, Garcia signed a non-disclosure agreement that called for his silence and the destruction of the evidence. According to the NDA presented in court, there were to be no duplicates of footage or stored communications about the incident. When asked if he read through everything before signing, Garcia said, "No, I was nervous." After the hotel security signed NDAs, Garcia told the court that Combs left and returned to the room with a brown paper bag and a money counter. Combs put stacks of money in the counter, $10,000 at a time, until it reached a total of $100,000, Garcia testified. According to Garcia, the original deal for the video with Garcia's boss was $50,000, but Combs said the excess cash was for the other two security guards. Lord. Garcia, who was making $10.50 an hour as a security guard, agreed to an NDA that included a $1 million penalty if he breached it. Garcia received $100,000 for himself and two other employees for helping Combs keep the music mogul's 2016 hotel beating of Ventura under wraps. Do you think that, at this particular point, I don't think Diddy is going to try and invoke that penalty against Garcia. Garcia told the court that Combs asked if he wanted to count the money he was getting from the video sale and asked how he intended to spend it. Garcia opted to trust the money counter. He testified and explained to Combs that he didn't know what he'd used the $30,000 he was getting from the deal. Combs then warned him not to make any big purchases. The hotel security guard said that he assumed Combs was advising against drawing attention to the money. Garcia added that he didn't deposit any of the cash into the bank and used the money to buy a used car. I know he's not going to face any charges from prosecution, but the IRS, I wonder, this is a question for an attorney. Can the IRS, though, go after him that you received this money and it was never reported to the IRS, like their portion? Oh my gosh. Based off of what he's describing, and again, we have to remember the jury's going to look, this is a security guard that took a bribe. So his credibility is already a little shaky with the jury. But based off of what he's describing when it comes to Diddy, asking, oh, how do you plan to spend it? You have a money counter, all that, says to me that this is not the first time that he's bribed people to cover something up, in my opinion, based on what we're hearing be described. So the hotel security guard said that he assumed Combs was advising against drawing attention to the money. Garcia added that he didn't deposit any of the cash into the bank and used the money to buy a used car. A car he probably doesn't even use anymore. Combs had kind words for the security guard who was making sure the damaged footage was disposed of, Garcia testified. On Easter, he said, "Happy Easter, my angel. God is good." Oh my gosh. And then proceeded to ask if anyone had asked about the incident or the video. Garcia testified about the March 2016 beating, saying, "I said I hadn't heard anything, and he said okay." Garcia said he later asked Combs about employment possibilities with the defendant's company. It is not immediately clear if Combs answered. Based off what I saw from Inner City Press, see, this is why I go back and forth. Inner City Press says that he never received a response, that the security guard never received a response from Diddy. I'm sure Diddy was done with him by then. When police began asking about the 2016 assault at the Intercontinental Hotel, Garcia said that he was initially honest with the investigators. Garcia testified that he was contacted by law enforcement and wasn't truthful about his involvement at first. He later got his own attorney and met with the government, where he said that he was more forthcoming. So I'm wondering, when they were investigating this incident, was this recently in 2024? Because it definitely wasn't in 2016. I'm wondering. I don't know the timeline of things, but I'm assuming because they were talking immediately about him speaking to the government. So I'm assuming that's when the video was released. That's when they initiated an investigation. Defense attorney Brian Steele briefly cross-examined Garcia, pointing out a line in the NDA that said that Garcia was not prevented from speaking about the 2016 assault in legal proceedings. That's common knowledge, common verbiage for an NDA. A lot of people don't read these NDAs. As you recall, he said that he didn't read his NDA. He was too nervous. This was presumably, according to NBC, intended to undermine the government's potential obstruction of justice, which is important for the RICO of it all, one of the predicate crimes that falls under racketeering. Prosecutors quickly took up a redirect, however, showing that the NDA requires a written notice to the company in those cases, meaning they have to let Diddy know. It says that this would allow the company to seek options to prevent disclosure. Garcia testified on redirect that he understood the company, in quotes, to be Combs' company. The government called Derek Ferguson the former CFO of Combs' Enterprises, literal his enterprise for those that get confused. The government's trying to prove that he created a criminal enterprise, but there is a company called Combs Enterprises. And Derek Ferguson was the CFO. Ferguson is wearing a suit and tie, said that he received a subpoena to appear in court today. Let me take a sip. As I do that, be sure to like the video. Derek Ferguson, who used to be the chief financial officer for Bad Boy Entertainment, said that he sometimes reported to Combs. Ferguson told the court that he held many roles working for Combs from 1998 to 2017. But went into detail on his roles as CFO of Bad Boy Entertainment. He handled budgets and salaries, was involved in deal making, and at times was responsible for Combs' personal finances. Ferguson told the court that he mainly reported to whoever serves as the president of Bad Boy Entertainment, who Harve Pierre, and I don't know Harve Pierre's position, I just know from back in the day, he was the president of Bad Boy. He has a long history of Diddy. He's been mentioned in this case. And speaking of people possibly testifying, I'm wondering because here's the thing. You have to also remember there is a civil lawsuit where Harve Pierre is named. So it makes me wonder, will he testify on the side of Diddy? Or if he testifies on the side of the prosecution, does that implicate him and harm his civil lawsuit where he's accused of very similar acts as Diddy? So, according to Derek Ferguson, he handled budgets and salaries, was involved in deal making, and at times was responsible for Combs' personal finances. Ferguson told the court that he mainly reported to whoever served as president of Bad Boy Entertainment. At times, there was no president, Ferguson said, and he reported directly to Combs. Although most of Ferguson's early testimony has been procedural, it's potentially crucial to the government's case, according to NBC News. He's been asked to verify a laundry list of bank accounts, real estate holdings, credit cards, and other financial records connected to Combs' enterprises, and confirm that the defendant had signatory power over these funds. This is sort of just painting the picture for the jury as to who's what, where, and how. Though most of the headline-grabbing testimony so far this trial has dealt with SA and other incidents of alleged acts of violence, Combs' real problems would be any evidence that he might have run a criminal enterprise to pull off these suspected crimes. The courtroom will take a lunch break, and let me just move on. So they said prosecutors say that they have about 20 minutes of direct questioning left for Ferguson, who has been going over how Combs' financials were managed. So they returned from lunch. Let's get into more of what's happening. So the true name and identity of key prosecution witness Mia are being reported according to prosecutors who want to ban the outlet that made the information public from court. Who? Was it a major news outlet? Didn't I tell you this yesterday? Because I told you there were a lot of people in the overflow room, and her image was shared by accident to the overflow room. So was it someone that was inside the court or outside the court? Let me do some research. Please pause. I have not been able to find what the outlet was, but I'm sure by later today, or maybe by the time I do the podcast version of this recap. But what I have gotten from Google AI, it says that it's been reported that during the Sean Diddy Combs trial, prosecutors have asked the judge to ban a media outlet and another person who had been attending the trial, accusing them of revealing the real identity of Mia, a former assistant who testified under a pseudonym. This request has been made because Mia was using a pseudonym to protect her privacy and safety against potential retaliation. So it's a media outlet and a person. I will keep you up to date because I'm going to find out, because I told you I'm not surprised. I predicted as soon as we were covering this yesterday that possibly someone's going to release that information. There are a lot of people that do not follow the guidelines of real journalism, including some major media outlets. I'm not even just saying that about bloggers I'm talking about some media outlets no longer follow, I should say, the guidelines of old school journalism, where a lot of times it comes in handy when being sensitive and not understanding protecting a survivor's identity. Because I told you, just because Diddy's in jail doesn't mean that his underlings are not on the outside still doing his dirty work. I already told you there are people outside with free Diddy shirts and they're getting paid $20 an hour. $20 an hour to wear them. Let me get back into this. All right, so that information came out. Prosecutors showed financial records from a Combs bank account, including $20,000 wire transfer from Ventura's father, December 23rd, 2011. That is just confirming Regina Ventura's testimony, where Diddy asked them for $20,000. They refinanced their home and then sent it to him so that he would not release an S-tape of their daughter. And then he ended up sending it back to them days later. Again, to show his control and his power and his influence, because he doesn't need $20,000. Ventura's mother, Regina, previously testified that Combs demanded the family pay $20,000 to keep him from releasing sexually explicit videos of Ventura after he learned that she was seeing rapper Scott Mescudi, also known as Kid Cudi. She also told the court that she received the money back days later. Prosecutors pointed out two other $20,000 transfers the same month while questioning Combs' former CFO. The first was an outgoing transfer to Ventura on December 14th, 2011, and another to an unspecified entity December 27th, 2011. But you know what they say, if you really want to get to the bottom of criminal activity, follow the money. So this CFO, I know some people are thinking, he's probably not going to say anything interesting. Oh, really? And notice how he's coming in the fourth week. He didn't come in the beginning. He's coming in the fourth week. I think he's piecing the prosecution is using him to help piece together what they're trying to prove. So Combs' defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, took up cross-examination for Ferguson, who worked for Combs between 1998 and 2017, a very long time, 20 years almost. Ferguson was asked why he was interested in working for Combs' Bad Boy Companies, which included the production company and record label. The former CFO told the court that he felt interested in Combs' companies because he felt it hired from communities where he was from. A Bronx native, Ferguson testified that he felt that Combs and his brands gave young executives from those types of communities opportunities. And I told you in yesterday's video, word on the street, according to a lot of people, there was like, this was strategic. Did he really believe that? Look, I'm not saying that Diddy is all bad, maybe 99%, but other people have testified he did give minorities opportunities. And he put women in positions of power, and I put power in quotes, strategically. And maybe he believed in them. Maybe he did not. I don't know. But I do believe that it was strategic in a lot of ways. And maybe in the coming weeks, we will see more of that pattern. So NBC News continues. They said, amid questioning from Agnifilo, Diddy's attorney, Ferguson said that Combs' personal and business expenses were kept separate and that tax records were closely monitored. Sidebar, I think he has to be careful too because he also was responsible for making sure that these things were separate. And if he didn't, that would put him in jeopardy. Goes back to my question, even though he might have immunity, I don't know if he does, I can't recall. If he has immunity through prosecution, doesn't protect him from the IRS that I know of. That's a question I'm going to have to send a DM to Kirsten. So amid questioning from Agnifilo, Ferguson said that Combs' personal and business expenses were kept separate and that the tax records were closely monitored. He says, I would do everything I could to make sure financial impropriety did not happen. He also wants to protect his current job because just because he's not working for Diddy any longer doesn't mean that he's still not working as a CFO at another company. And if you admit to not doing what you were supposed to do financially here, that would 100% I can guarantee that he would lose the job. That I don't know if he's currently working somewhere else. I'm assuming that he probably is. Combs' former chief financial officer said that he doesn't know of any specific crimes his ex-boss might have committed. Defense lawyer Agnifilo asked Ferguson several questions, inquiring if the witness had ever seen Combs commit an act of violence, sexual assault, or use coercion or enlist the help of an employee to commit an illegal act. Each time, Ferguson said no. Ferguson's too busy in the office crunching numbers. But again, we know why the prosecution has brought them in. We know what the defense is doing here. Ferguson probably gave the prosecution all it really needed from him earlier in his testimony when he confirmed that a $20,000 payment was made from Ventura's family to Combs. So that's probably all they wanted from him, I'm guessing. The prosecution offered a brief redirect of Ferguson, where the former finance chief was asked to qualify his time with Combs after the defense questioned him on observations of criminal conduct or lack thereof. Ferguson testified that he worked in the New York office for Combs' company and had not spent time in his hotel rooms or private residences with him. Just to go back and solidify, yes, all the prosecution want from Mr. Ferguson is the fact that he can confirm this $20,000 that was sent to Diddy from Cassie's mother. The jury has been dismissed as attorneys stay back to discuss additional details on how the rest of the week will go. Prosecutors are concerned for the identity of victim 2. We're not talking about Mia, victim 4. Victim 2, who is referred to under the pseudonym Jane. They are requesting that her face isn't shown in the public overflow rooms to avoid publicly outing her as Mia was last week. Jane is expected to take the stand on Thursday. So this will be interesting. Combs' attorneys are once again asking for more time with him without dividing screen because they wish to go over text messages between him and, quote, Jane, the victim number 2, that will likely be entered into evidence. Wow. Okay. Guys, that's day 15 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial and our coverage here. As I said before, you never know, depending on when we upload the podcast version of this, I might add additional content. If not, Anything that I feel that is pertinent, I will either mention it or cite it in our next recap tomorrow. If you enjoy content like this, or if you're trying to stay up to date and you want just a summary, you know where you can follow. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on breaking news, because I promise at some particular point I will go live and cover some of this, sometimes because that is just easier depending on how the day goes, or because there is some breaking news. We've got your coverage here on the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Again, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to share this video. Don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget, if you're listening to this, to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And if you're not following us there, you should. Shout out to our King's Guards, shout out to our channel members, and of course, shout out to our subscribers. And those of you watching in the bushes, we appreciate you watching as well, but subscribe. Don't rely on an algorithm to let you know what is happening with this Sean Diddy Combs trial. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to Kempire here on the Kempire Radio Network. As always, you can hear Kempire on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. More information can be found on KempireRadio.com.